So welcome to everybody joining us in Zoom. We just have about 3 minutes and we'll be getting started with this class at 9:05. And welcome to anybody who might be on our YouTube live stream as well. So welcome to everybody joining in our Zoom meeting or on our YouTube live stream. We just have about a minute and then we'll start class right at 9:05. So hang in there. So a warm welcome to everybody joining us this morning for a walk with the planets. My name is Drew Bush and I'm the Director of Programs at the Fairbanks Museum and Planetarium. And in a moment, I'll turn over our class today to Mark Breen, whose voice you may recognize. You can tell actually if you see his screen in a minute where he is and the name Eye on the Sky in the background. But first, I just wanted to quickly let everybody know how to participate today in today's meeting. At the bottom of your Zoom meeting, if you mouse down there, you'll actually see that there is a Q&A button on the left. And you can definitely ask any question you might like in there. You can, of course, ask it anonymously. You'll see an option for that in the Q&A box if you might prefer to be anonymous. But to the right of that button, you'll also see a chat button. So on that chat button, you can chat with us, you can chat with each other. That's a great place to answer any questions that Mark might pose during today's class. And then finally, if you're joining us on our YouTube live stream, on the YouTube website itself, if you're logged into a Google account, on the upper right, you'll actually see a chat there as well where you can pose questions. And I'll be keeping track of that chat just to make sure if you ask questions that we can get them answered today by Mark as well. So one note, we of course are recording this session. It will be broadcast later on Kingdom Access Television. So welcome to anybody who might be viewing this later on this week. But if you're thinking about asking questions, please do keep that in mind as well. So without further ado, I will turn it over to Mark Breen.
All right. Well, thanks, Drew. So today, my goal is to give you an opportunity to, one, get a better sense of using something called Stellarium, which is a free software program, and you can use that to be able to view the sky. And the other thing is that we can use that to maybe explore a little bit about how planets move in the sky along with the sun, the moon. So we're going to do a little exploring with that. So the first thing to do would be, hopefully, if you downloaded Stellarium, you can use it. If not, you can download the program from the website called stellarium.org. It's, like I said, it's a free download. It's not a very large program, so most computers handle it quite nicely, and you can basically watch the sky. So whether you're doing this live or later on, obviously later on you'd be able to kind of stop and start and get an idea of some of the different uh, things that you can use. But I'm just going to give you a kind of a quick tutorial. How do you use this program? And so we'll start. I'm going to give you a view of this program. The way that it starts up, at least in a normal sense, you can make some adjustments, but you can perhaps now see, looks like a blue sky out there. Obviously, that's not the real sky. And then you can see a relatively low horizon. You can actually change those types of things if you want to get real fussy about this. But one of the key things about Stellarium is that you can change both your viewing direction and you can change time. I think those are kind of the two key things that you'll want to be aware of. So let's first just give you just a quick thought about what you're looking at, your view. So one of the first things that's very helpful is to be able to change the direction you're looking at. In fact, if you look toward the bottom of the screen, just in the grassy area, you can see a small S down at the bottom, obviously for south. Where it's bright over to the left, you can see southeast, SE over there, and then over to the right, you can see southwest, located over there. So it gives you directions. Now, suppose you don't want to be looking toward the south. Maybe you want to look maybe more toward the east or to the west. You can use the arrow buttons on your keypad, and that will change it. So you can use your keypad. And so if you use the right arrow, it will take you to the right as you're looking, or in other words, toward the west. And we can do that. I think we can do that. Let's see here. There we go. You can see things are moving. You can see southwest is now in front. And if we keep going, we have west in front. And so that's one way to think about changing your view. Now, since we're doing that, the other thing that you can do is with your mouse, you can actually left click and hold down, and then you can move your mouse and you can actually move your view. So we're going to move back over. You can see how we're moving back over to south. And once your cursor disappears off the side of the screen, you'll just have to reach over and grab a little bit more. In fact, if we grab a bit more than that, there's the sun up in the sky, climbing up into the east and southeast. So you get a sense of maybe how to move where you're looking at. The other thing is that, in terms of viewing, you may want to look up higher or lower. Again, you can use your mouse. You can move it up or down. And of course, you can use your arrow, on your keypad. You can go up and down that way. Now, the other thing, like I said, you want to see which direction you're looking at, but you may want to look closer or sometimes farther away. Now, to adjust that, you can use kind of a combination. If you hold down the control key and then use the up and down arrows, you can zoom in or zoom out. So if you hold the control key down and you hit the up button, you can zoom in. There's not much to zoom in on there. Maybe let's just kind of pan down a little bit so you can zoom in toward the horizon. Or if you use the down arrow, again, holding the control button, you can zoom back out. Now, with a mouse, you can also use the scroll on a mouse to be able to go in and out. If you don't have that option, maybe you have one of those little touch pads, you can use two fingers. And if you use two fingers and go up, it zooms in. If you use two fingers and go down, it zooms back out. That I find is a little bit glitchier, but that is a way to do that. So we've given you ways to change the direction you're looking and zooming in and out. Those are really helpful. The other thing, of course, so that's the viewing part. The other thing is time. You can adjust how quickly the sky is moving. You can change the date or all kinds of options that way. But let's just kind of work with some fairly simple ones. So the first one is to simply speed up time. Now, if you look at the very bottom of the screen, you'll see showing up the time where it says 2020, that's the year, 04, the month, and 02, the day, so April 2nd. And you can see the time, which is the current time. Very often when the program starts up, it just simply runs at current time, but you can change that. So one of the first things to do is to simply go faster. Now, to do that, you're going to use three different letters, J, K, and L. So as it turns out, L will increase your speed. And so if you push L, now I guess it's probably good to know that when you push L once, it increases the speed by 10 times. If you push it a second time, it increases speed by a multiple of 10. So in other words, it goes from 10 times faster to 100 times faster. And if you push it yet again, it goes 1,000 times faster. So the more you push L, the faster it goes. And in general, you don't want to go too fast. Going 10 times faster really doesn't show up very much. So if I push it once, you don't see much of a change. Although if you look at the bottom of the screen, you can see time is moving along more quickly. If I push it a second time, now you can see the time is definitely changing. And if you look carefully on the top left of the screen, you can see the sun's actually moving. Not very quickly, but it is moving across the sky. This is often kind of a nice speed, going, hitting L twice. So you're going forward about 100 times faster than normal. If you go 1,000 times faster, if we push L one more time, now things are certainly moving along, and yet nothing unreasonably so. The time on the bottom here, we've gotten past noon and now 1 o'clock. You can see the sun going across the sky. Now, if you hit K, it goes immediately back to real-time progression. It stays wherever it's at. In other words, if you look at the bottom of the screen, it says 15:13, which would be 3:13 in the afternoon. But you can see how the time has stopped going forward. If you use J, you can go backwards. And indeed, if we push J 3 times, so we're going kind of the same speed backwards that we did before, you can see the sun is now definitely going backwards across the sky. So there's just another option for you in terms of being able to change time. You can go back in time as well. Now we're going to hit K and we're going to kind of let it go at normal speed for the moment. The other thing that you can do in terms of changing time, and sometimes either you're in a bit of a hurry or you want to see how things change over kind of jumps of time, you can go forward or backwards by the hour. Now to do that, you're going to use the plus and minus keys up near the top, the plus equal and the minus and underscore buttons that are just to the right of the 0 on most keypads. And in this case, you're going to want to use the control button. So you hold the control button down, and if you use the plus key, the plus equals key, you can actually see, we'll do this now, see how the sun jumps, and you can look at the time. The time is jumping forward by an hour each. In fact, if I go one more step or two more steps, the stars are out. And you can go backwards in time using the minus and the underscore key just to the left of the plus and equal key. If you go back in time, you can see the sun returns to the sky. So that's going forward and backwards by hour using the control and the plus or minus. That I find very handy. It gets me to the time that I want to look at, quickly brings me backwards if I need to do that as well. So we've gone forward just by speeding up time, or going backwards by going backwards in time. You can do this just kind of a smooth way. You can jump by hour. And now we're going to do one more thing. You can also do it by the day. So if you look at the bottom of the screen, it's 11:51 on the screen, and it is today, April 2nd. But if you want to look at what the sky looks like on April 3rd or 4th, you can use those same keys, the plus and minus keys that we just used, but just don't hold down the control button. If you just use those keys, we can go forward day by day or backwards day by day. So if you kind of keep track on the bottom of the screen, you can see April 2nd. If I use the plus key, it's now April 3rd. Now the sky didn't really change a lot. And that's because the sky really doesn't change much from one day to the next. There are some changes, and we're going to talk about that in a little bit. But I wanted to give you an idea that as you go forward, and we can go forward several days. Here's the 4th, 5th, 6th, 7th, 8th. Oh, something's happening. What do you notice? Let's go back to today. I'm using the plus and minus keys without anything else. If you look at the sun right now, if you go forward in time, day by day, so going to the 3rd, 4th, 5th, 6th, 7th, 8th, 9th, 10th, 11th, 12th, 13, 14, there's the 15th of the month. What happened to the sun? And what can you infer from that? And this is visually looking. Obviously, the sun is higher in the sky. And we kind of know that's what's going on, but now you have a tool that you can actually see it, and you can change the time in terms of looking at it day by day. You can see it going up and down. We've got one more slightly faster change that you can also make. So let's first of all bring it back to today. And there are a couple of things that are worth noting. Bringing it back to today, there's one other kind of set of controls that's very helpful for you. Using your cursor, if you bring it all the way down to the bottom of the screen, you'll notice a series of buttons pop up. These buttons along the bottom have a number of options to them, but the one that I wanted to specifically point out is just to the right of this arrow button. It's kind of a funny, almost an hourglass looking button next to it. If you click on that button, it brings you back to the current time and day. So if I click on that button, notice the sun jumped back over to the left. The day has returned to April 2nd, and the time has returned to the current time, about 20 minutes after 9 o'clock. There is another set of buttons on the far left. Again, moving your cursor to the left side of the screen, there are a series of options that you can explore over here. And we can do that in a little bit. There are a couple of applications for that. But for right now, I just wanted you to be aware that they are there. So I did mention there is a way to go forward in time even more quickly. In this case, we're jumping forward or going backwards 1 week at a time. Now, to do that, let's first of all, maybe you can just take a second, see if you remember how to zoom out a little bit. Remember, you can use the keypad or your mouse, whether it's a pad on your laptop, or if you have a actual physical mouse that you can use. But if you do that, and I'm going to zoom out myself using the control button and the down arrow, so I can see a little bit more sky. But now we're going to use the bracket buttons. So on the top row of letters, after you get past the letter P on the right, there are 2 bracket keys. Obviously a kind of a beginning bracket and an ending bracket. If you use the ending bracket, so skip over the one next to the P, so 2 keys to the right of the P, you can go forward week by week. Now again, since we're going forward in time, except this time instead of day by day, week by week, what would you anticipate the sun to do? I'm guessing that you're probably thinking that we're going forward in time, the sun should be higher in the sky. So let's do that now. We're going to go forward week by week. Again, you can keep track of the date at the bottom of the screen. So today is the 2nd. If we go forward a week, now it's the 9th. And we can keep doing that. In fact, let's go to about the middle of May. So there's April 9th and the 16th, the 23rd, May 30th, or April 30th, May 7th, and now May 14th. And well, a couple of things have shown up here all of a sudden. You notice the moon showing up over in the sky over toward the southwest? That's the position of the moon on May 14th at 9:22 in the morning. So you can go forward in time and you can go backwards in time. Again, the bracket keys is what I'm using. The beginning bracket key, the one just to the right of P, will take you back week by week. And we can do that as well. And you can see now the sun is getting lower in the sky. Well, the moon has reappeared. There it is on April 16th. And we'll go back to today. All right, so that gives you at least some ways of moving both your view and changing time. These are all key things because if we're going to be observing the motion of the planets, if you go outside on any clear night and you just look, motion is going to be quite slow. It would take a lot of observation time. And that's one of the nice things about this program, Stellarium, is you can speed up your observation time. You can speed up how things change. And that allows you to get a little better sense, I think, how the motions in the sky work. So let's keep that in mind. And of course, if you have any questions about these motions, a couple of things. On Stellarium, simply if you hit the H button, let's see if we can get that to show up. That didn't do what I wanted it to do. Okay. I may be misremembering, but over on the left side of the screen, there is a question mark. Oh, sure, it isn't H, it's actually F1. If you hit the F1 button, or you can click on the help window, you can see right in the middle of your screen showing up, you can see a list of the very many things that you can do to change your view, your time, all kinds of things in Stellarium. You can explore that when you have some time. But I just wanted to give you a sense that if you're getting stuck, if you can't remember how to do something, it's a great way to do that. Again, that's the F1 button, or you can use just the left side of the screen, the question mark, to show up the help window. Okay, so what we're going to do is we are going to explore the evening sky. If you've had a chance to see the evening sky anytime in the past couple of months, you can't avoid noticing the brilliant planet Venus. So the first thing we want to do is change our view. We are looking toward the south, but the sun sets in the west. So we want to change our sky so we're looking toward the west. I'm just going to use my arrow keys. I think that's usually an easy way to get me over toward west. So now I'm looking toward west, and we'll bring that west, the horizon part, down a little bit. And let's go forward in time. And I could use the L key to just speed up time. Or if you remember, you can use the control key and hit plus or minus, and you can go forward or backward by hour. And I think that's a convenient way to do that. So we're going to go control plus, and you can see on the bottom of the screen, time is moving along. There's the sun coming down lower into the sky, getting to the horizon. And so we'll just pause here just momentarily, just before the sun sets. Now that we've got close to the time that we want, perhaps you would want to use time to speed things up a little bit so that you can see the evening arrive. So we'll push the L button maybe a couple of times, and you can adjust that depending on how quickly you want the sun to set. We'll let the sun go below the horizon. You can see the stars coming out, and there is Venus. Now it's nicely labeled for you on here. So there's Venus. Brilliant. You can see it over there. And I guess maybe that's one of the first motions we should talk about. Let's go back in time You can use the J button. You can reverse time. You can hit it, oh, maybe 2 or 3 times until it's moving back up. And we'll let the sun just briefly come back out. And I'm hitting K to stop that motion. And so here we are just at sunset. So the first motion that we saw was, of course, the sun going across the sky. But the sun doesn't go across the sky. Of course, the Earth is turning. So let's keep that in mind as we go forward in time again using the L button. We'll go forward. We'll push it maybe 2 or 3 times until we can see the sun going below the horizon. And you can see the motion. Venus is going lower and lower, as are all the stars. So let's stop here for a moment. So the first motion we're seeing is that everything in the sky, Venus, the planet, the stars, are all going toward the western horizon. That, of course, is the Earth spinning. We'll keep that in mind in terms of one of the motions. But now that we have Venus out in view, let's get closer to Venus. This just happens to be a great couple of days to be watching Venus in the sky. Unfortunately, it doesn't look like our weather's going to cooperate. And in some ways, this is kind of a one-time event. This doesn't happen all the time, but at least you can see it on the Stellarium screen. So we're going to get closer now. That was one of the first things that I talked about. How do you get closer? How do you zoom in? Again, you can use the scroll wheel on your mouse, or you can use your keypad by using the control key, holding it down, going with the up or down arrows. And finally, you can use a mouse pad in which you use 2 fingers and you can come closer or farther away. So I'm going to use the control key and my up arrow to zoom in closer to Venus and closer. Of course, it's getting toward the bottom of my screen. Now remember, you can change your view. You can use your mouse and use the left button. If you click left and then hold that down, you can move Venus up into view. Now immediately, as I do so, you can see something just above Venus. It isn't labeled. Does anybody know what that is just above Venus? I'll give you a moment to take a look at that. You can see there are some stars above it. We can even zoom in a little bit closer. Again, I'll use my control up arrow, and you can see there are some stars above Venus. If you were thinking those are the 7 sisters, you're right. Those are the 7 sisters, also known as the Pleiades. So there's Venus. There it is tonight. It's a little bit after 9 o'clock. Again, just to reminding you that you can see the time that you're viewing on the bottom of the screen. So there's Venus. Now, again, we're talking about the motion of planets. That's kind of the underlying theme here. So if we were to go forward in time, you can use the L button as a good example of that. We can speed up time. And as we do so, okay, so we can see time's advancing, and you can see both Venus and the 7 sisters, or the Pleiades, are dropping lower on the screen. It's simply, we're speeding up time. The Earth is spinning faster, and we'll stop it now using the K button. And so that's the motion that you would see if you were watching over an extended period of time. You can see the time has changed from about 9 minutes after 9 o'clock. 21, again, that's 21 hours, or 9 o'clock in the evening. It's now 9:36 in the evening. So let's go backwards in time. Let's bring Venus back up to where we saw it before. So we'll use the J button, and you'll have to click it a few times until it's moving back up. Not too fast. Whoa. I just hit the K button to stop that motion. So there's Venus. There are the 7 sisters. Now, the other options that I mentioned in terms of motion would be to change it. Instead of speeding up time, we can change it by the day or by the hour. So let's change it first by the hour. Now, I think because of the motion and how close we're looking at Venus, we may want to zoom back out a little bit. So let's do that. Let's zoom back out. I'm using the control down arrow, and you can see things are getting a little smaller, a little farther away. You can also see perhaps a tree down toward the bottom. I'll give you a chance to get rid of that in just a second, and you'll see why. But there's Venus shortly after 9 o'clock. Now, if we go forward 1 hour, if you remember, you can do that by using the Control plus key. If you hold down the Control plus key and go forward 1 hour, Venus disappeared. That's didn't really disappear. It's simply behind the tree that's in the foreground here. So another little viewing option that's helpful to know. And the letters are pretty conveniently labeled. I think they're pretty intuitive. That's where the ground is. Well, G is the letter that controls whether you see the ground or not. So if you push the letter G, you can see the tree disappears and Venus and the seven sisters reappear. In fact, it's what we call it just toggles. It just goes back and forth between seeing the ground or not seeing the ground. If you push the G again, the tree comes back. And that's true of the entire horizon. It's not just a tree control, it's the entire ground that's out there. So I've removed the ground for a moment. Let's go back an hour. This is a good little exercise to get you used to using these keys. By Control and then the minus key, you can see Venus jumps up. If you use the plus key, it jumps back down by an hour. So that's the motion you can see. Again, Venus next to the seven sisters. So we're going to expand our time a little bit more. So we went speeding up time, then we went forward by an hour. Now we're going to go forward by a day. So we're going to stay at the same time. If you look on the bottom of the screen, so it's about 9:15, 9:14. There's Venus. I want to get a little bit closer. We're closer to Venus, not too much, but maybe you can zoom in a little bit, not necessary. But I wanted to see Venus clearly next to the seven sisters. So if we go forward one day, now instead of holding the control key down, if you simply push the plus key, if you do that, you can see Venus where it is instead of tonight, tomorrow night, same time. Did you see that? I'm going to get my cursor out of the way there. Again, you can go backwards and forwards in time. So if you use the minus key, Venus is below the seven sisters tonight. Tomorrow night, it's actually right next to those stars. And the next night, Saturday night, Venus will be above the seven sisters. So now we have a change in motion. That's the first time that we've seen that. We've seen motion because the Earth is spinning around, but now we have something else going on. Venus actually moved compared to the seven sisters. So what's going on? Any idea who is moving? Obviously, this is an observation thing. If you were outside watching, you would see Venus change its location relative to the seven sisters over just a couple of days. Again, this is not something that's going to happen very often. It turns out the orbits of Venus and Earth are basically timed out so that this will repeat. You'll see this again, but you'll have to wait 8 years. It does happen again in the year 2028. So it's unfortunate that the weather pattern is the way it is, but at least you can see at virtually how this changes over time. So let's go back to tonight. You can see Venus located just below the seven sisters, but you can see, well, actually two things change. If I put my cursor just to the left of Venus, so we can kind of keep track of where Venus is in the sky, is Venus moving or are the stars moving? That's an interesting idea. If we observe here, now I'm keeping my cursor in the same place, and if I use the plus key to go forward a day, Venus really didn't change very much. It looks like the seven sisters are doing the moving. Now, The stars themselves don't technically move. So we need to kind of figure out what's moving. Okay, so we know we've gone forward, and the one motion that's going on as we go forward in time, day by day by day, the Earth is going around the sun. And that actually changes where we see the stars every single night. So that's one motion that you're seeing. You're seeing the stars actually getting closer to the horizon each day. The stars that you see in the west each evening will get a little closer to the horizon. It turns out it's a distance or a time distance of 4 minutes. Each night, the sky shifts 4 minutes worth, so that even though the time is the same, you're seeing stars in a different position because you and I are in a different position. The Earth is going around the sun, so that changes your view out into space. So that's why during the different times of the year, we actually have different stars and constellations that appear. So that answers part of that question. But Venus, now Venus is a planet. It's going around the sun just as we are. So let's think about Venus and its motion. Now, the tricky part about seeing Venus and its motion is that the Earth is moving at the same time. So we need a way to better see how Venus is changing in the sky. One of the things that we can use that'll help with that is there are some grids that you can place in the sky that will give you something to mark things with. Just like we do on a globe, you use latitude and longitude. In this case, we're going to use some similar lines in the sky. Now, to do this more effectively, we're going to first of all go back to tonight so we can kind of keep track of things, which means using the minus key just next to the 0. And let's go back to tonight. So this is the 5th, the 4th, the 3rd, and now we're back to the 2nd. And I want to zoom back out a little bit. So control down arrow, or you can use the scroll wheel on your mouse, and you can get a slightly larger view. And one thing that we might want to return to the sky just briefly is the ground. I have the ground turned off right now, but using the letter G, you can turn the ground back on, and you can see all of a sudden there's the ground appearing. So the charts or grids that you can place in the sky, there are two different ones. And again, you can use the help button, which is over on the left, the question mark, or you can simply use the key F1 and it will bring up the help window. But we don't need to do that completely. There are just two letters that you need to know, or two keys really. The first one is the letter Z. It turns out that Z will place a grid in the sky that I think makes sense to most of us. So if I go ahead and press that, and you can do that at home as well, press the Z, and suddenly there's a grid. And it seems to make sense. There are lines that run parallel with the horizon, and there are lines that go up from the horizon. In fact, if we keep zooming out, if you go farther and farther out, control down arrow, you can see that eventually those lines all meet at the very top of the sky. So that's one grid pattern. And it's, again, one that makes sense. You can see how high something is above the horizon, and you can also see where it is in terms of direction, north, south, east, or west. However, that's only relative to what you're going outside and seeing. We're talking about the motion of stars and planets in terms of time and their independent motions of the Earth. So to think about that, we're going to use a different grid. Now, again, much like the ground, this grid disappears by pressing the same letter again. So Z turns it on and off. Z turns it on, another push of Z, and it disappears. So the other letter that we're going to use is the letter E. E in this case stands for equatorial. It means it's related to the Earth's equator. So this is a series of lines that astronomers use that give us a grid pattern that's really very, very much like the latitude and longitude lines that you see on a globe projected out into space. So if you press the E, perhaps you already have, you can see a different grid and a different center point. Notice there's a center point over toward the north, over a little bit to the right. We'll talk about that in a moment. But in the meantime, neither of the lines are parallel to the horizon. Instead, we have lines that are parallel to the Earth's lines, the latitude and longitude lines. It's not easily visible. I find this is one of the things in the program that's a little challenging, but you can see 0 degrees on the top a little bit to the left where my cursor is. The 0 degree line, which comes down this way, is the Earth's equator projected out into space. So that's what that line represents. Each line in this case goes up 10 degrees, so that's 10 degrees, 20, 30, all the way up to 90 degrees, which would be just above the North Pole. Now this grid, because it's connected to the Earth instead of where you're standing on the Earth, but just the Earth in general, this actually gives us a better idea of some of the motions in the sky. So now that we have this, we're going to zoom back in on Venus, and we can do that by the control up arrow. We can get closer and closer to Venus. At some point, oh, you can already see. Let's see if let me just back out for a second. Additional lines appear. As you get closer, the sky adds lines automatically. It just gives you a better idea of where things are, kind of gives you some measurements. So we've talked about degrees. The other number that appears, and you can see it toward the bottom of the screen here, we can see some numbers that have hours and minutes. This right here, toward the very bottom center, says 3H30N, 3 hours and 30 minutes. That's not time in terms of what time you're looking at on a clock. That's actually time, or really part of the grid in the sky. And so we use, instead of degrees, when we're looking east and west, we're actually using time units. And of course, the Earth spins around once every 24 hours. So there are 24 time units in this grid. Now, I wanted to use this because we were talking about the motion of Venus and the motion of the Seven Sisters, or the Pleiades. So let's even zoom in maybe just a little bit more so we can see more lines. I'm also going to reposition my view, and you have the option to do that by using the control, or no, let's not use the control arrow, but instead just the up and down arrows. If I use the down arrow, it shifts my view. I'm looking lower, so that shifts Venus and the Seven Sisters a little higher. So there they are, and I wanted to show you this because I wanted you to see these stars and this grid pattern. So let's keep track of those for just a moment. And one thing that you can do, again, I'll introduce a new idea. If you click on, with the left mouse button, if you click on any object, a star or a planet, it will focus on that. Now, it's not going to change your view immediately, but you can see, and let's use Venus as an example. When I click on it, you can see some lines kind of going around and in and out. It also shows you information about Venus. If you look over on the left-hand side of the screen, it tells you the brightness of Venus, its magnitude, and obviously a long list of other details about Venus. The important thing is it's now given you a spot where you can see exactly where Venus is. Or we can click on one of the stars in the Seven Sisters. And if we click on it, it'll show you the name of the star and other designations. On the top left, Alcyone is the name of the star itself. That has several other different names, including, I believe that's Eta Tau, 25 Tau, HIP is the Hipparchus number. So there are a lot of different star catalogs, a lot of information. The key thing here is to keep track of this star compared to the grid. So now we're going to change time. And again, we were going forward by time using the plus and minus key. So we're going to do that now. And let's watch the stars compared to Venus. And if we go forward day by day using the plus and minus keys, let's go forward one day and you'll see Venus is here. Now the stars haven't changed compared to where they are located. Venus, however, has moved. Venus was here, it's moved here. In fact, this line, which it's a little tough to see, but that's actually 4 hours, no, excuse me, 3 hours and 50 minutes. So that's that 3 hours and 50 minutes, 3 hours and 55 minutes. So if we go forward one more day, again, using the plus key, Venus has now moved to 3 hours and about 53 minutes. You can actually see those numbers if you look over on the left-hand side of the screen. These numbers over here, we're not going to get too fussy about that right at the moment, but I just wanted you to notice that. So the stars don't change relative to this grid. They always are in the same place. In fact, stars are often designated as a specific location. Planets, however, move. And so Venus is moving, and you can see we'll go forward one more day. Venus is doing the moving in this case. Venus is moving this way relative to the stars. So now you have a way to be able to see Venus's motion. Now, if you think about it, when we first saw Venus, we were watching Venus setting toward the western horizon, much the same as all the objects in the sky. What was really happening, though, at a much, much, much slower pace, Venus is actually moving to the upper left relative to the stars. So there's a kind of a clue about motion of planets that you wouldn't necessarily see unless you did a lot of observations over a series of nights, hoping for clear skies every night. This is where this program really becomes an advantage. You get a great opportunity to see night after night how things change in the sky. So that's a great example of Venus and its motion in the sky. Since we're talking about motions in the sky and planets, there are 3 other planets to view, but they're at a completely different time. So we've got a few things to rearrange here. We've zoomed in on Venus and the 7 sisters. So the first thing to do, let's zoom back out to a somewhat more normal view. So we can use the control down button, or you can use your scroll wheel on your mouse, and you can go back out and away. The lines gradually become fewer, but you can see where Venus is located. Notice the time, by the way. It's 9:30, 21:30 in the evening. So there's Venus, and you can see the 7 sisters. Actually, that star is still circled, so it gives you a little sense of where that is. We can also let the grid disappear for right now. So we'll use the letter E that brought it up. If we use the E again, it disappears. So I said that there are some other planets to view. You just have to be up early in the morning to do that. So early in the morning means, 1, we need to change the time. And we've talked about that a little bit. There are a few ways that you can do that. You can use the letters J, K, and L to change time. You can also use the plus and minus keys. In this case, we can change time by going forward, and probably you want to use going forward hour by hour, which would mean using the control plus key. The other thing, though, is that we're not looking in the correct direction. West is a great direction to look for planets in the evening, but we want to be looking in the east. So we've got to change 2 things, the time and the direction that we're looking. So we're going to want to look toward the southeast. To do that, you can use your mouse, and you can use the left button. If you hold the left button down on the mouse and grab the screen, you can move the screen, and we're going to look over toward the southeast. You can also use your arrow keys. The right hand arrow, the arrow that points to the right, will bring you to the right this way, but you don't want to go that way. You want to use the left button, the left arrow, and that'll take you over towards south and eventually southeast. So we're looking in the southeast. It's of course 9:30 at night, so we don't see any morning planets yet. So let's go forward in time. If you remember, you can use the control plus key. So hold down the control key and then hit plus. And now we'll go forward hour by hour. You can see new stars are coming up. It's now past midnight. Just bring your attention down below. It's 1:30 in the morning. It's 2:30 in the morning, 3:30. Oh, I don't have to tell you what's showing up. Stellarium points it out for you very nicely. You can see the planet Jupiter coming up in the morning. It's already 3:30 and it's up. So if you wanted to find out exactly what time it would be rising, you can use the J, K, and L buttons. In this case, it's already up, so you want to go back in time. If you use the J button, push it a few times, not too many, but you can start Jupiter moving backwards. You can see it's now heading back toward the horizon. And you can see the time is going backwards as well. So you could estimate that Jupiter would be rising above the horizon. It looks like right about now. I'll push the K to stop the motion. So a little bit after 3 o'clock in the morning, 3:07, Jupiter is just appearing in the sky. We'll go forward in time. In this case, we can use the L button, and by pushing it a few times, you can get Jupiter to climb up higher in the sky. But you notice there was something else next to it. So we'll let that emerge. You can see Jupiter is rising again. Jupiter's motion, that's the Earth that's moving, turning, so that we'll eventually see the sun come up above the horizon. But now the planet Saturn has appeared. And below Saturn, just coming up, the planet Mars. Now, these three planets, they're very close together, relatively speaking. We don't often find planets clumped together quite this closely, but it's a great view. And this will be something that you can see going right through the month. But there are some changes taking place. Now, one of the things that I didn't do is I didn't change the date. So if you look down at the bottom, the date is not tomorrow morning. It's actually April 6th. So if we were to move a few days backwards and forwards, let's first of all stop the motion. We now have Jupiter, Saturn, and Mars in a pretty good view in terms of the sky. So we'll use the K button to make time just go at our normal speed. So there they are appearing in the sky. It's just about 5 o'clock in the morning. So that gives you an idea of when to look for them in the southeast. At least you don't want to look much earlier than that. They'd be too close to the horizon. But let's go back in time in terms of the date. So let's keep track of them. There's Mars, Saturn, and Jupiter. If we go backwards day by day using the minus key, you can see Mars change relative to Saturn. So now we are on April 2nd. This was actually early this morning. You can see Saturn and Mars much closer together. They also shifted a little closer to the horizon. Again, the Earth is gradually moving, of course, in its orbit. So that's going to change where we see them. But we're going to watch, if you go forward in time, you can see Mars slowly moving away from Saturn toward the left. Those are moving independently as well. And oh, we've got one more visitor in here. This is a good place to kind of wrap up. We have the moon showing up. You can click on the moon and you can see details about the moon listed on the left. And we'll add one more trick, and this is something that you can explore on your own. But there's the moon, but the moon looks very tiny, and it's really not, well, of course, you can get closer. Let's zoom in closer. You can use the scroll wheel or the control up arrow. And as we get closer to the moon, notice it's not just a round spot. I'm adjusting my view so I can see it a little better. But as we zoom in, we have a crescent moon. This is the actual size of the moon. But if I zoom back out again, control down arrow, it does look rather small in the sky. You can adjust that. If you go over to the left side of the screen and This is to change your view a little bit. This using the F4 button, or you can use this handy on-screen thing. You can click on this, and what appears is all kinds of choices, probably too many choices, but what you really want to see, SSO stands for Solar System Objects. If you click on that, you'll have an option over on the right-hand side to scale the moon. You can change the size of the moon. The 4 over on the far right indicates you're going to make it 4 times larger than what you normally see. So if we check that box, and then we can close this, you can now see the moon is much larger, but it does give you a better sense of what the moon looks like. If you don't want to see those funny little lines, you can click the right mouse button and that disappears. And so now you can see what this is a view looking southeast with the moon, and look at the date. It's April 15th. So you could actually put that on your calendar. If you want to look to see when the moon is going to be near those planets, you can do that by advancing time. So we've just got an introduction to the motions of these planets and an introduction to using Stellarium as well. So I'm going to stop sharing the screen right now. And so hopefully you get a little sense of that. Again, you can rewatch this on our YouTube channel, and that'll give you maybe a chance to experiment with these same things. It'll give you a chance to download the Stellarium program if you haven't already. And if depending on how our teaching schedule goes, we may review this again. I have another program that's also a lot of fun to do. It actually shows us different motions in the sky, and so we'll introduce that at a later date. All right, so that's what we have for this morning. Thanks, Drew, for hosting this morning.
Yeah, and thank you, Mark, for a really wonderful lesson with Stellarium. Actually, we do have quite a focus on astronomy. So if you're interested in continuing to learn with Mark, he'll be teaching on 9:05 on Thursdays for the upcoming weeks, and probably using Stellarium in some of those classes. Bobby Farley's Rubio and some of our other educators will also be teaching our What's Up Tonight Skies. So that's the show you would have gotten if you were a visitor at the museum for a 20 to 30 minute live show about what's going on in the night sky that night. Those will be on Tuesdays and Thursdays at 2:30 p.m. And we have a number of other programs, so definitely check our schedule at fairbanksmuseum.org. You can look under the Learn tab at Virtual Learning, and there's a full Google schedule there and a number of different astronomy items and things that use Stellarium. So I just wanted to thank everybody again for joining us in Zoom, for joining us on our YouTube live stream, for joining us perhaps after this broadcast on Kingdom Access Television or your local cable access network. And just wanted to give, of course, a very warm thanks to Mark for teaching us all today. So I hope everyone has a great day.